Good morning, party people, or should I say not party people for this particular episode. And welcome to Hangouts and Headlines, November 28th, 2022. We're back. We had American Thanksgiving. I have to say American because sometimes I say Thanksgiving to, I don't know, some of my Canadian friends who may or may not be backstage right now. And they say, that was so long ago. So it was American Thanksgiving this past week. And very importantly, before we welcome my guest on and we have a great hangout and fun time talking about work stories, I do have to mention a couple of things kind of in the background, little housekeeping, important notes. Let's see if I can bring one of those important notes up. Just make sure we got oh my God, let's see. What that isn't Hangouts and Headlines material. What is this? I don't even understand. I guess maybe it'll make more sense if I take a sip from this awesome new mug COUNSEL got me for my tea this morning. Oh my goodness. Wow, that's quite the score. That seems like it was higher than last year. Crazy stuff. In any event, we're not going to stay too long on sports ball, but it was a fantastic weekend in Hoeg House. Hey, I'm allowed to do this. We have last won at Ohio State in the year 2000. So, you can think about where you were, what you were doing, if you were alive. In that year 2000. So we're going to have that short little gotcha Buckeyes period. And then we're going to leave it alone. And we're going to welcome in our guest today who doesn't sleep. I think literally Ian Runkle of the Bailey. How you doing this morning? I know that sports ball was very important to you. Sorry you had to miss that.
I mean, I'm just sad that I didn't get to watch the. Oh wait, no, I'm not sad. Yeah. I didn't get to watch the game. I'm the other thing.
Yeah.
No. Sleep is one of those things that eludes me sometimes, and now is one of those times. So here we are.
And Snoopykins gifted 5 Hoeg Law memberships. Pretty awesome, Snoopykins. Thank you so much. I don't know if that's just to support the channel, in support of the wonderful Michigan Wolverines and their march to an undefeated season for the first time in 25 years. These are the reasons I can speak like this, because it's unlikely to happen ever again. And interestingly enough, on live here, the one thing I was concerned about, which you'll hear me talk about throughout the season, is like, what does my Monday hangouts look like after we've lost? Still don't know. So we're having a lot of fun in this space. And Ian, I promise I won't just talk about my wonderful Michigan Wolverines the whole episode. So Ian's going to keep me honest here. You guys don't have to listen to that for 40 minutes.
At some point I'd just be like, and out.
He just nope out of here like he's the last broadcast on the Nostromo.
Yeah.
Snoopykins, congratulations on 4 years, Hoeg. Hope we get to see much more of your content. Have some more members as an anniversary gift. Oh, it's a gift from Snoopykins for our 4th anniversary. If you guys didn't see it on either the community post or my Twitter post yesterday, I do like to celebrate by marking, what the size of the channel is, how it's doing on the anniversary, November 27th. And you can go see that. I can actually probably pull that up from at least the Twitter side of things. And I love to go and look at exactly how we're doing, where we've been. And it's been 4 years since the first episode of Virtual Legality, which just is mind-blowing to me.
Man, that's a big milestone.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like I don't know where the time went. I still remember the conversations that were like, are you going to have enough content to actually put up on this stuff? And we're at more than 1,000 videos at the 4-year mark.
The really weird thing about that is, like, when I started, it felt like there just wasn't enough stuff happening to talk about, and now it just feels like there's too much stuff.
Oh, I can't cover everything. Yeah.
Well, and I get people who are like, "Why aren't you covering this?" And I'm like, because I'm like, how? I'm covering all these things, and when do I do this?
No, absolutely. I like the ones that have like a political conspiracy for why I'm not covering any given thing.
Oh man, I got
you coward. It's like, okay.
Well, I get people who are like, why aren't you covering the gun stuff in Canada all the time? I'm like, because it's depressing to me. And so I'll cover it as I can, but I'm also going to mix in some other stuff because it's super depressing.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I find myself doing. It's good to hear you do that too, Ian, which is like, well, we do hangouts 4 times a week. A lot of times we're going to talk about serious articles. A lot of times we're going to talk about important stuff, whether it's antitrust or, we've done the medical system and the educational system. We'll be back for those. We didn't solve those problems, folks. But sometimes, like today, I had 4 days of Thanksgiving. I wanted to do something a little bit lighter, coming back in, kind of getting back into the motions, the patterns of doing these kinds of things, remembering where all the buttons are, which honest to God took me a second. Setting some of the things up this morning, so that's always nice. It's like, oh good, my memory and my muscle recall is doing great work. 4 days off. If I ever take a week off, you might not ever have another Hangouts, folks, because I'll just forget how to do the thing.
Yeah,
but
I know that feeling too, because you come back to things after recording a video or after you haven't recorded something for a while, and you're just like, how do I talk to the camera again?
Right. There's so much of that. There's like, how does this work? It's like, wow, did I ever sound decent on this? And you guys can leave those comments to this chat or below the video as well, telling me no. That's fair. I accept all that criticism. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, all right, I know how I'm going to be to start the Monday. I know I have, if you're interested, folks, I have I think 2 or 3 guest appearances for things that'll pop up over the week that I have to tape today. And I have to get back to doing law. So it's a big Monday here at Hoeg Law. And so I wanted to take an article that was maybe a little bit chiller. I think somebody in the Twitter side of things said it sounds like a Friday. Sounds like a casual Friday article. It might. Yeah, sometimes we just pick the lighter stuff for Friday. But it's fun. It's fun. So you didn't have American Thanksgiving, Ian. So you just trooped along. I saw a big video from you and Andrea about amicus briefs. You want to talk to folks about that? Are they solid? Are they solid legal constructions?
There's something.
Okay.
I'm just astounded that at least one of them at least kind of lands in the realm of an amicus brief.
Okay, good.
I don't think it's good, but it at least makes some arguments that an amicus brief should make, because properly an amicus brief should be about the law, right? Not about the facts of a specific case, because what you want to say is a particular legal interpretation will hurt these interests that are outside outside the parties, but the facts only affect the parties. But these ones are saying you need to make determinations on the facts, and one of them also says these are legal interpretations, you should consider our viewpoint. So that one at least, but the other one is just purely you need to find the facts this way or else bad things happen to women. And I'm just like, that's not proper for an amicus brief at all. Yeah. So
well, right, an amicus brief is supposed to be helping the court understand impacts, understand things that it might not otherwise note, or that the parties wouldn't have a reason to bring to the court's attention themselves, right?
Yeah, and it's supposed to be things that will that'll affect other people, right? That won't just affect the people in the case, because the people who argue the impacts on the people in the case are the people in the case. But nope, they're going full bore on case or court got it wrong on the facts, and
it's a weird place to relitigate.
If I was the appeals court, at least the one of them I'd bounce and just say no. We're just outright rejecting this. You don't even get to
amend.
We're not even going to read this any further, kind of thing. So
yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting because if they kick it out, if they actually kick out an amicus brief, you're going to get the wailing and gnashing of teeth of
and that's one thing I commented on, is that I wonder if that's actually the goal of at least one of them.
To get the system to kick them out,
to basically file a brief that they know will get kicked out, and then they can complain about it having been kicked out, and milk that for the make press statements about, oh, the court is so biased because they kicked out our brief, and meanwhile the court is like, no, we kicked out your brief because it's so biased.
Yeah. It's such a weird case, and it's such a weird thing to watch kind of be politicized the whole way.
Well, I sort of warn people. I'm like, court cases are a really bad sort of proxy war. They're bad to just sort of be like, this court case has to be won based on, or like, my team thinks this court case has to be won in a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
But people think that all the time, and it's just such a bad way of looking at things. Because usually court cases are won and lost on their facts.
Yep. No, and I think you can hear certainly me saying it when we're covering that trial. As I said, a lot of people want to say this is, this means this symbolically for this. It's like, well, trials are a really bad mechanism for making, large sweeping policy pronouncements. And if you try, you get into this situation, which is like, this is what this means. It's like, well, this is very specific about cutting fingers and kicking airplane chairs and whatnot. That's what the trial is supposed to do.
Well, and we saw similar stuff in Canada with things like a trial over. We had the Jian Ghomeshi trial, which was an SA trial, and he was acquitted, and people were saying this is bad for women. And I'm like, but he was acquitted because they found that that people were lying.
Yeah, so it's a problem, and people really struggle with it. I mean, we see lawyers and law affiliated people struggling with, the fact that this is a very specific set of circumstances. So I'm definitely going to check out that video. I was trying to stay offline as much as possible. I kind of failed during the football game, but I was trying to stay offline as much as possible this weekend, and that's why I went dark. And as these things go, Microsoft and Sony and Politico and Bloomberg and like all hell broke loose on some of the stories that I cover here. So I've got some videos to put together for y'all on that stuff.
Isn't that always the way? It's like you have these times where you're just like, what is happening? Nothing. And then suddenly it's like, oh, what's happening? Everything.
Yeah, there can be days where it's like, oh, I haven't done a virtual legality in 3 days or whatever. I want to do something. And you look around and you're like, is that a stretch for subject matter? Is that, should I even make this video? And then I said I was going to take 5 days. I said I was going to take Wednesday through Sunday off. And then Wednesday, all the responses on the Microsoft Sony deal come in, and I do a 3-hour stream on the Sony response. And then people get mad at me. It's like, well, you didn't cover the Microsoft response, because I'm pretty mean to Sony in their response. And I said, yeah, well, that one was 111 pages, and I knew I was never going to be able to do that in this kind of restful status. But I do feel a little bit guilty, because it's like there's stuff to comment and potentially criticize on in that Microsoft document. And so it comes off as like, well, I only just assaulted Sony on their legal reasoning and not Microsoft. So it's like trying to find that place when it's like, yeah, but if I'm gonna hustle through December and onward, I need to take a few days.
Yeah, and that's always tough, right? Because it's just like, I don't know, it's a weird game, the whole YouTube thing.
It is, but I can't speak to you, Ian. I constantly feel like guilty if I see something happen, if I get all the tweets and it's like, I could comment on that, but anything we do in this space takes like multiples of the time that you see us actually doing it, whether that's a VOD or a stream or anything. Like I was prepping this stuff for this video, which is light, right? We don't have a very high level of substance in this article. We're going to be talking about kind of just stories and things. I still prepped it for an hour before the stream. That's just what I do. And so everything that we do is just a little bit more time. And it's like, well, you got to talk about this Politico article. It's like, okay, I will. But like, that's a 3-hour prep time. And I am trying to hang out with my family, and so it's trying to balance those things, but it's pretty fun. All right. I was going to hit a couple of chats here.
Oh yeah.
Rick's quick review of the Guardians of the Galaxy game, Rusty Robots. It was my game of the year last year. I think it is one of the strongest narratives of kind of modern video gaming. If you want to check that out, I highly, highly recommend it. I think, Ian, you haven't played that yet, right?
I haven't. Maybe I should see if that's on, because Steam's got a sale on a bunch of stuff.
Is it their winter sale?
See that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Guardians of the Galaxy is a absolute surprise, smash success. which has character arcs, is not overly pretentious, and doesn't meander in the Norse wilderness for 35 hours.
I kind of was giving it a miss initially
Sure.
on the basis of like, it's a Marvel game.
Mm-hmm.
Marvel has kind of done the Marvel plot. Like their plots have sort of become really samey. If I could say that. I don't think they write their video games. It's not an MCU game. So the Guardians are slightly different. Honestly, by the time you get to the end, if you're anything like me, I think I actually like the video game Guardians a little bit better than the movie Guardians. I really like the first movie, but yeah. I don't know.
The first movie was a nice homage to Star Wars. The second movie was a little bit, up its own butt. Family friendly.
Yeah, I kind of thought that. I mean, the second movie had some great moments.
It did.
But the overall movie was like, yeah.
Well, I like the video game better than both. And it does some really, really awesome stuff. Which it's a year old now, but I still don't want to spoil because they did such a good job of not even ever talking about what that game is about, other than it's the Guardians of the Galaxy, that I highly recommend people go in and check it out. I do think you could probably get it on sale.
It looks like it's on sale at $30 down from $80. And guys, I'm not affiliated with them at all. So I'm just looking at this right now. So I just made a buy because I was just like, yeah, okay, if it's down that far, it'll be a while before the other
that might be the impetus behind the question. Somebody looking at it on the Steam sale or one of the console sales and being like, Rick, what do you think? Literally, you can go see my review. But it's not even a review necessarily, but I do the top games of the year in December with my brother. And the last section is my number one. It's Guardians of the Galaxy. You can go check that out from last year's video. So Rusty Robots, I hope that's helpful. Massive, massive, massive recommend from me. Lots of congrats on the Michigan win. Yeah, I had a lot to do with it. Very responsible for all that happened.
I know you were pushing hard for it, so everything that could be done from that chair was something that Rick was doing.
I can't tell you how happy I was. I can't. Saturday, man, I should have just popped up on video and just been like this, just grinning from ear to ear for 20 solid minutes. I wouldn't say anything coherent. I had already lost my voice from screaming, but it was great. Here's Britt, whose new title I can never fully remember, Britt, but it's like Lord of the Cosmos and everything he surveys or she surveys. You are welcome. You asked for when I delivered, although I will say I did fall asleep in the second half due to lack of interest. The second half? That's where all the Michigan scoring was. I did not fall asleep in the second half, Britt. I did not fall asleep. Akaruki says, I'm not sleeping if Runkle is guesting. So you're helping other people's sleep issues in. Being on this morning.
Now I feel bad. It's like, oh, that's not good.
Don says hi from Oz and happy 4 years at Hoeg Law. It's fantastic. I love anniversary time. Happy 4th anniversary, Hoeg's channel. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. We're meeting the goals that I had internally set for myself. We're gonna need new goals, which is always kind of a fun thing. All right. Prototopics, David says, hey, Ian's here too.
And David, if you're wondering, David right now is wearing the wizard hat because he wears that at all times, except sometimes when he comes on to stream. And
that's right. I like the notion that he wears a wizard's hat and dresses as a wizard at all times, except when he's DMing Lawyers and Dragons.
Yes. That's when he takes it off.
Happy 4th anniversary. Today is my 17th anniversary with my husband. Congratulations on your anniversary, Maribel. Heart emoji. He is deployed, so a normal day here. LOL. Well, I hope you get to have a non-normal anniversary celebration day relatively soon. But that is an awesome anniversary. That is a lot of years being co-counselor at 15. So it's been a while for both of us, and I hope your marriage is as awesome as you want it to be. Gina D, good morning from beautiful Boca Raton, Florida. Rick and Ian, how about that score? Go blue. Blue heart emoji. Maize heart emoji. Looks like yellow to you, but it's really maize. You just don't realize it. Yep, maize and blue, undefeated, playing for the Big Ten championship this coming weekend. Sibling Creature asked me when I say, hey, I'm going to have to do some law today. So it's what I actually did a lot of before this whole YouTube thing, right? Drafting documents, talking to clients, working with them on deals. They still need me. So I can't just be on stream all the time.
Isn't that the worst when you're like, oh, well, I would love to be on this stream, but no, I just can't. Yeah.
Go find different times. Absolutely. I hear that. It's interesting. It's one of the hardest things I think I do right now with kind of the two jobs, which is they are very different hats, and putting your brain in the two different spaces is it's a little, you gotta get that gear shift down, because it's a completely different kind of skill set.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of the stuff like on a video, sometimes you are going and being like, this really upsets me, and then you have to transition to doing like court online, because since the pandemic, a lot of court appearances can be made online, but you've got to switch gears into I am in court now mode, and like you cannot drop an F-bomb in court.
Exactly. That's the weirdest thing, right? Because as an actual functional like process level, you're still sitting in front of the same camera in all likelihood. You're still doing the same kind of motions in a different room. So you go to court, I might be talking at a board meeting or otherwise having a negotiating conversation where you can drop F-bombs if it's to help your client. But it's the same pose in the same room in a different context, and it takes a little while to get used to.
Court, you just have to be really, and even stuff that's not like dropping an F-bomb, you can't say that somebody's arguments are just the dumbest thing you've ever seen, in court.
You gotta have comedy. Yeah.
There's a little, I mean, the comedy that you can use in court is much more, it's got to be subtle. It's got to be a scalpel blade and not a fire axe. And yeah.
Abigail asks if my voice is okay because it's lower. So a couple of things happen in Michigan in the winter, and one is that the heaters have to come on. And I will just tell you, I will do my best to have as much tea as possible, but it is a drier household. It is one of the things we have to work through here in the Midwest or upper Midwest. And I don't have enough humidifiers in my entire house to keep my voice properly humid.
I was going to ask if you had humidifiers as an option, because I will say they have made my life much better. Although at times humidifiers have made my life much worse.
How does a humidifier make your life worse? I'm curious about this.
Well, we've got a humidifier that is attached to our furnace as a default thing. And if you turn that water line on, it floods the house. So that is something we had to learn the hard way.
I bet. You got giant masking tape over it now? Do not press?
It's like off with like a wire through it so that you can't turn it without and
oh yeah, that would definitely go terribly wrong.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got like a little portable humidifier that does a pretty good job, but yeah, it's
so I got those going. I got two in most rooms. We do have the one hooked up to the furnace. I think it's a lie. We crank it. I don't know that it is actually very effective. So you're going to get a little bit of that. The other aspect of this is the game was Saturday, and my recovery on that may or may not be fully concluded. So
was there some reason why you might have been shouting during that game?
I if you wanted to hear me swear, you missed it. You could have gotten a recording of the sports game, because it was a lot of, you call that a touchdown? You do it right now.
See, that I would like to record sometime, because on stream you're pretty good about that.
Yeah. No, it's really the only time where I get very let's call it enthusiastic. My daughter said I am intimidating while I watch Michigan football in particular, because that doesn't come out for Lions games.
sometime I got to make it down to Michigan, and I don't do the sports ball, but I will sit there watch you watching the sports ball. Just be
We'll
like,
have fun.
hey.
We'll have fun. You can come. Heck, we could even go to a game if you wanted to, but I think you might be miserable.
I don't know. They serve beer at those?
Yeah, kind of. Kind of.
They don't serve Malort, do they?
In my youth, it actually was all like ankle flasks, because nobody was searching, and it was specifically prohibited at I think it was at all NCAA, all college events, because they didn't want to be associated with that. So it was basically pre-gaming and then stumbling into games. And then I think I had the worst drink of my life at a Michigan game where it was, God, I can't even remember now. It was something like cinnamon schnapps in an ankle flask.
I
was like,
got,
warmed in the Michigan sun.
I've got flasks, but I think, they do probably do a lot of searching these days. I drank from a flask a fair bit in Norway, because Norway, the bars are insanely expensive.
Okay.
And that was so smuggling alcohol into bars was was a thing.
See, that's great. That's great. Well, they do. We could get around it depending on what you need to get through a sports ball game. We can figure it out. Certainly, we can drop by a tailgate or 10, because I do have the inns. I have some pretty good inns at the radio station and at the law firms that like to throw some big parties.
I've never been to a tailgate party. That's not really a thing here, as far as I know.
Oh my goodness, it's like an entire tent city around Michigan Stadium. All right, well, that sounds like fun. We should chalk that up. We'll find a game that you don't think you'll hate, and we'll figure that out.
I mean, the thing is I'm not a huge sports fan, although they do tend to be better in person. Partially because then you've got the whole crowd of people who are getting excited, and that I think helps.
I have enough Michiganders. Maybe we'll do our own tailgate and we'll throw up a signing tent just for Ian. Ian will sign your glossy headshot photos of him. We'll have a tailgate outside of Michigan Stadium. And we'll go try to experience the sports ball together. See, that sounds like fun.
You say that like you wouldn't have a lineup for people wanting to sign stuff.
Oh no, nobody's getting signed Hoeg glossies. This will be an Ian show.
I feel like you undersell that, but we can have that argument. We can sit there and like have a little tally thing for how many.
You could have the count. You could have the count. Crazy Cat Queen says, "Happy 4th anniversary, Hoeg Law. I'm so glad I found your channel. Congrats on your Michigan Blue as well." Was a great game to watch. My Florida State Noles also had a great win against the University of Florida Swamp Lizards. That's alligators to you and me. Yes, I saw that. A lot of interesting results from rivalry week.
I was like, did they seriously name a team Swamp Lizards? I was going to be impressed, but
well, their stadium is called the Swamp, and I've long been impressed by Florida's atmosphere when they're good. Now, a little bit less impressed when they're not.
Is it the Swamp, or is it something like the Microsoft Swamp or something like that?
I don't think it's sponsored. For the most part, there isn't a lot of sponsorships on college stadiums, at least of the Blue Bloods, the historically good schools. So Michigan Stadium is Michigan Stadium, aka the Big House. Also, the highest seating in, I think, the country. I think it's third highest in the world, something like that. And you do get exceptions to that, but it's mostly still pretty non-commercial as these things go. But it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So thank you, Crazy Cat Queen. Very happy to hear about your win as well. I'm looking forward to the postseason now. Hopefully Michigan continues to be awesome. Snoopy Kid says, please don't ever feel guilty about not covering something. Family and real life comes first. I hear you. I agree. It's tricky. When I say I feel guilty, I mean, I have that twinge of guilt. It's not like I'm sitting there going, oh God, But it is like, oh, I could offer something here. Also, people would be enthused about it. Also, there would be clicks, and YouTube might like it, and
Well,
all this kind of stuff. It's like you take 4 days off. It's like, what exactly is YouTube going to think about that? It's like, he's dead. Kill him.
yeah. There is a certain point where, like, if you take a week off, the next video you post is going to be like a fifth of your usual views, and it doesn't matter what it is. It's like, it could be, I personally have evidence that, Amber Heard, engaged in a bank theft, like a bank robbery or something.
That's a hypothetical video, not an accusation.
This is a hypothetical, but like, and it would be like 500 views. And you're just like, oh.
Yep. No, it likes you. It likes it when you're always there. And I think that if you start talking about those things, that's one of the interesting parts, right? Because we talk about Taylor and Kat and all YouTube monetizes whatever garbage, and they all should be shot at dawn and that kind of thing. And it's funny because there are things that the algorithm and the platforms do poorly. I don't know that it's monetizing specific versions of content, because I think the headlines or the descriptions can get you to wherever you need to be on some of that stuff. But it certainly incentivizes what I would describe as unhealthy contribution or content creation patterns, that it really doesn't give you any credit for a nice, once every 6 days kind of thing. And so I do think you get into those situations where maybe I could see YouTube or Twitch. I hear about this a lot on Twitch from my friends that do Twitch more. Maybe they could do better on that stuff.
The other thing that astounds me on some of this stuff is just how much the platforms manipulate you. And what I mean by that is, like, Patreon sends me an email when somebody signs up to be a new patron.
They do.
But they don't do squat when somebody signs off, like when somebody drops it. That I have to log into to see, right? And Twitter does the same thing. So, like, here's the list of people who followed you, but it's not like, here's the list of people who decided you suck. So that's always weird, because it's like they're trying to say, like, hey, you're doing good, go. And I'm like, this is kind of manipulative. This is kind of, they're trying to poke you to have certain things. And I go, like, guys, I don't like that feeling of them messing with me.
Yeah, but all the platforms do that. And, the YouTube stuff, I know we were talking about it offline. We don't need to go into it too much detail, but the YouTube stuff also, as your channel gets bigger, they kind of half offer new things and maybe make them ultra difficult, maybe just don't give them after they say they will. And it's a lot of dealing with companies that are too big to truly care, but also want you to be making the money. And it's tricky.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer to this, but it's kind of annoying, because you want to, like, if you want to take a trip sometime, you either need to bring recording equipment with you so that you can do stuff where you are, or you need to, like, create a backlog. And it's tough, because a video that's like 30 minutes is like 4 hours of work sometimes. So this whole notion of, like, I'm gonna get videos ready for a 2-week vacation is just like, oh, that's such a hill. And they have to be videos that can be released whenever, right? Because if you do topical coverage, it's like, how do you
I hear that, and I'm also just I have very little self-control on that. If I think I have a good one in the kitty or the hopper, it's like, we gotta put it up.
I do that too, because, like, some of the stuff, like the Trailer Park Boys video, I recorded that, and that one I just released, but I did have the thought of, like, this is something I could release whenever, so I could save it for when I want to take a few days. And then I was just like, no, I want to share it with, because I want to share with my audience. I view them as, like, friends, and it's like, I want to, I want to see people's reactions. I want to make people happy, hopefully. So, yeah.
Well, that's part of the fun, right? Is having these interactions, having these conversations is fun. One of the very first things that I realized I really loved when I started Virtual Legality was these were these topics that were kind of, minute. This is a terms of service paragraph, and whether you could get a refund for this thing or that thing is against, this precedent or whatever. And I wanted to have the conversations, and nobody was really having them. And what was starting and is bigger now is that you get these kind of you're building almost like a forum post of like what you wanted to talk about. And you get all these various things. Some are, oh, that's really insightful. I hadn't thought about that. Or some that is, you dumbass. And
Yeah.
you forgot these things. Both, honest to God, this is the truth, are equally good. Like, I like to go and think, oh yeah, I could have covered it that way. That's a good note. Or, okay, dude.
I mean, I like the people who are like, hey, here's a, here's something you didn't think of or whatever else. And, but you get people who are just straight up abusive too. And it's like, maybe not so much on those guys.
You get used to it in this space. I really wish you didn't have to, because I do think it keeps like good voices. I think it keeps people that could contribute a lot to the conversation and to the space. They look at, one of us dealing with a mob or just, mean posting or whatever. It's like, no, I don't. I don't want to deal with any of that.
I did a talk here locally a little bit ago to say, like, this is what you'll experience if you get into YouTube and start, I'm like, the first thing you'll experience is probably throwing a lot of videos into the void. And just because, like, your first video will probably get like 2 views and it'll be somebody who clicked by accident. Your thumbnail came up and it's just like, oh man, I meant to click this other video. So it'll be a view for like 6 seconds. And somebody's like, wait a minute, this isn't what I clicked.
Who is this guy?
Yeah. And so, you get that of like that sort of, but once you start seeing growth, you start getting people who will be just incredibly abusive at times. And that's, that's kind of an experience the first time it happens. Like the first time you get a death threat over a video and you're like, okay. Random dude saw my video and wants to murder me.
Yeah. Yep. Hey, good times. Good times. And I don't blame anybody for looking at that and saying, no, not interested in any of that.
I was just like, you gotta, I was warning people. I'm like, this is something that happens. And if you're not able to process that, you're gonna have a rough time. Right. So,
Look, we got people that are in favor of you going to a tailgate, Ian. So look, Shereen says you'll become a football fan after you go to a tailgate.
that might be true, actually.
They're fun. They're parties. Brisk fall air in Michigan. Good stuff. Brett, Ian, just say you're Canadian and the flask is your maple syrup. I'm sure they'll let you pass.
I think that they might want to test it out, and then I'd be screwed.
God, if you give them like cinnamon schnapps, it'll be like, it might be syrup. I don't know. It was
what I need is like 2 flasks, one that is the obvious one for them to find, and that one can just be full of maple syrup. And they'd just be like, seriously?
Can I point to Northville on my hand? I don't know if I can do it in reverse. See, is the problem. It's like there. Southeast Michigan, suburb of Detroit, close between Detroit and Ann Arbor. Picked in part because the law firm that I was working had offices in Ann Arbor, Detroit, and Lansing. And it's kind of like on the highways to all of those things. But it is it's a fantastic little town. And I think I started talking about Northville in my very first video of the intros that you people say you can repeat now to Virtual Legality. So I've said them too much. I should just tape a video or something, but it's fun to do those. And you can't, it's not every state that you can actually describe where you are on your hand. So it's Michigan. Knoxville Buckeye, gracious with the super chat. Grr, hail to the victors, they say. Until next year.
That's very, very big of them.
I will try to remember to be gracious. when next we lose to you. What a day. What an amazing day. Okay, so we got this story. I'm sorry, I'm just reliving Saturday.
I saw the headline. I haven't seen the story, but I saw the headline. I was like, what the heck?
Yeah, so we'll talk about this a little bit. Oh, gosh, I forgot to change this tab off. That was weird to me. Sorry about that. And so, yeah, I got this sent to me. I really do. When I say people, I can't be everywhere online and send me, send me headlines and whatnot. It's the truth. These are the kinds of fun things where I say, oh, that would be an interesting headline. And there isn't a lot of substance here. And we've also got to follow up with, I think, the Washington Post. There isn't a lot of substance here. It's just kind of an interesting, funny story. But we'll take a look at this. The headline, as Business Insider puts it, and Business Insider always writes like super long sentences. These always remind me of like Parks and Rec headlines. A man won the legal right to not be fun at work after refusing to embrace excessive alcoholism and promiscuity. Now, this is essentially what he accuses them of. We're going to look at the French court here, and we're going to look at some Google.
Yeah, I was going to say, I bet some of that is his quotation as opposed to like work's description of what they were encouraging.
Right. So we're going to talk about it, as a headline, which is always okay. So yes, Ian, you're exactly right. This is basically the court finds for the man, but this is what the man says he was being asked to do, and we'll take a look at it a little bit. We have to take it with the grain of salt as usual. It's fully translated from French, so it's all kind of complete alien speak, but we can pull out the pieces of what this actual court case says, and we can talk about how France appears to be interpreting its labor law as well as the European Convention on Human Rights. If I get that titling slightly wrong, I apologize, Europeans in the chat. And we're also going to talk a little bit about how it differs, in my opinion, from how most jurisdictions would treat this question in the United States, understanding that I'm an American lawyer, Ian is a Canadian lawyer, and even in the United States, labor law is one of those areas where you can have some pretty big distinctions across jurisdictions. California and Michigan have very different labor laws. New York and Florida have very different labor laws. So we'll be talking about a little bit 30,000 feet up on this. But this is the headline that goes out there. This is what people kind of seized on. Dude wins the right to not have to go to after-work parties, give or take, to not be fun. Sure. Okay. Let's see how Business Insider describes this in more particularity.
I always love the stock photos that they choose for these things because people in the chat never do stock photos because you don't get to choose what that goes to. And so if you do a stock photo of you looking sad, that might be used for like a newspaper thing, but that newspaper thing could be anything from like, guy is disappointed after he loses his appeal for, creeping on kids at a park. And it's like, here's this stock photo. There have actually been some lawsuits over that too, where people have been like, you can't just use my stock photo next to anything. But
I'd want to see the contract. Yeah. That would be very interesting. Well, this looks to me like it's set up as people celebrate goal or something. Like it looks like they're celebrating a sports moment at the bar.
I think this is supposed to be work celebration at bar because everyone's in suits and ties.
I get that they're in suits, but this seems like a moment in time. Even if you show up at the bar, what exactly happened to get you to this? Also, what kind of TV is this in the background here? I mean, that's like a CRT. Do you figure that's a security monitor? Because you're not watching the old sports ball game on that, I don't think. I have a lot of thoughts.
They're monitoring a shuttle launch or something.
Right? Right? So, yeah, and then this guy seems the most enthused. Now, he doesn't have a hover hand right here. This is a big hug. And I don't know what's happening here for business here. So we got a lot of things going on in this photo, but Ian's exactly right. These gentlemen did not sign up to be associated with the French drinking story.
And the excessive alcoholism and promiscuity story. Like, hey,
sharing the promiscuity.
Please put my name down for promiscuity, or my picture down for promiscuity. Like, yeah, nobody did that.
This is also a place or either a time where you've got just really long ties. These ties are very excessively long.
And wide.
Wide ties, excessively long, somewhat crazy business hair. Like, I just have a lot of thoughts on this. What kind of work environment is this? Are these people from the same employer? Is this a different job?
I feel like this is like 80s or 90s or something.
It feels that way, doesn't it? It feels that old. And of course, you got to have the white collars. You got to make sure you have the white collars. You have the white collar. Like, this guy's out. I don't even know what he's doing. You can't.
He's fired.
Collar. That doesn't work.
He's fired after this.
White collar. This guy goes to have the pinstripe and the white collar. This is maximum right here. So yeah. Hey, who knows? Who knows what's happening? But it's a fun aspect of the entire article. Appreciate you making us stop at the stock photo, Ian. A French court has ruled. Actually, now I'm curious. What does the Washington Post use for their photoing? Sure. Corporate drinking culture has been criticized in court cases in multiple countries. iStock. So,
and then, this is the picture, like, these guys get to be the face of promiscuity.
I don't think the Washington Post actually highlights the promiscuity, do they? No, they say French man wins right to not be fun at work.
And they highlight humiliating and intrusive. I think that's a better. Somebody's suggesting it might be a wedding, and I think that might make sense.
For our first stock photo?
For the first stock photo.
Yeah, it could be wedding. It's this eye line that really confuses me. Like,
that eye line looks like they might be watching a screen.
Yeah, this looks like hockey goal, or it's something that's sudden. Soccer goal. That kind of thing.
Goal, and a bunch of people have bet on this. Like, I feel like they had money down on this one.
Yeah. It's headlines and stock photos here today on our Monday back. I love it. We got comments, people talking about the tie. That Sarah, I couldn't look at anything except that tie. LOL. It's hey.
I mean, I've got a what do you call it? I've got a subscription to a stock photo service, and I will tell you, those stock photos range from anything from like, yep, this is something I could totally see using, and in some cases do use, down to like, why does this photo exist? Like, what universe led to this being a thing? So my favorite is the ones that show people at work that are just like clearly stupid. Like, where you've got somebody who's holding a soldering iron by the iron part of it.
Right. Well, there's game stock photos that I always love where it's like the controller's upside down. It's like, oh, that's got to be difficult to play that way.
Yeah, it's like, how do these end up so badly? I think some of them must be on purpose.
So Crazy Cat Queen has a membership comment, which don't pull over into the StreamYard. So I'm sorry about that, Crazy Cat Queen. In the Army, once you become a certain rank position, we have mandatory fun with lots of alcohol, but not mandatory to drink. Not mandatory to drink. David at Prototopic says he's not wrong. Ian and I use the same stock photo site. Laughing emojis. All right. We've had fun with the stock photos. What does this French court say? A French court has ruled that companies can't fire their workers for failing to be sufficiently fun. Now, this is interesting because it's described as a French court. It appears, and we're going to take all of this with the know enough to be dangerous, can research enough to be dangerous on this stuff. It appears that it is, in fact, the highest court. The Court of Cassation, which is not a term I was familiar with before this video. Social Chamber rendered the following judgment. If we go and we look at some help with understanding the French court system, Court of Cassation appears to be the French Supreme Court. So it appears to be high level court decision making here, and they will reference the below Court of Appeals decision. So this does appear to be perhaps more than a French court.
Yeah, it's not just any random court.
Appears to be the French court. Has ruled that companies can't fire workers for failing to be fun. And we can start to get into this a little bit before we get into the Business Insider and Washington Post, because honest to God, folks, they're not going to add a lot of substance here. This isn't an investigative piece. This appears to be one that the editor said, oh, this is funny. Write that up real quick. So we get partial cassation, which is probably doing what it sounds like. They've got a half win for one side and a half win for the other. According to the judgment under appeal from March 10th, 2021, in case you think all justice systems are quick and speedy or faster than America, it takes a while. Mr. T, I pity the fool, was hired from February 7th.
I'm kissing probably not that, Mr. T.
Well, hey, I don't know. I actually find this very interesting from an international perspective. Like, this is like specific anonymity in the French court for bringing this claim, right? Like, that's the idea.
That's pretty cool. I mean, but it's an employment law case. Like, that's not usually where you get those anonymity decisions.
It's possible that there's a French standard that it's anonymous unless there's like a public interest, like at the opposite standard that we get here. I can't speak to that because I agree with you, Ian. Nobody's accused of like really bad wrongdoing here. He kind of accuses his employer of that a little bit, but
not really bad wrongdoing, like mildly bad. Like, you fired me and you shouldn't have.
Right. No, we're not talking about Activision type stuff. So Mr. T was hired from February 7th, 2011 by Cubic Partners as a senior consultant, then promoted to director from February 2014. So starts a decade ago, gets promoted after 3 years of work. Generally, that's a pretty good sign that you're fitting in. And then he is dismissed for professional incompetence by letter noted on March 11th, 2015. So he stays in that director role for a year, and then he's booted. That's the state of play here.
And for incompetence.
Yeah. So in Europe, we know that it's you generally have to be a little bit more specific about why you're hiring and firing people than you do in America. And like, that's one of the things I want to talk about in this story is there are good reasons why the French court is going to find why it did. We'll talk about those as well. But in the United States, for the most part, employers are going to be at will, which is a phrase in legal art that says the employer can walk away from you and the employee can walk away from the employer. And, you know, that has some benefits on either side, but you get into a big philosophical.
Which one walks away from the other more often, do you think?
Well, I certainly think that employees move more often than employers fire them. But you do have all sorts of stories right now about, you know, mass layoffs and things, as certainly the economy is adjusting and prepping for a recession. So you get into these discussions philosophically about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, because of, you know, the power differences between the employers with their jobs and the employees and wanting to do them. But I just want to set the stage properly for folks, which is that in general, the United States, and there are exceptions to this. California in particular is a little bit more actively protective of labor interests than other jurisdictions. Will say you're at will. And if a company doesn't like the cut of your jib for any reason, give or take, they're going to be able to let you go, with certain exceptions for discrimination and firing whistleblowers and things like that. There are certain protective safe harbors that you have to watch out for in the United States. But that's a little bit different than what we're going to be talking about today in France, where what we're going to see, and so like I said, it's translated, so it's a little bit tricky to kind of get specifically here. And fun and pro is how this got translated. I don't think that's for promiscuity. I don't exactly know what pro is. I think it's just positive. Being fun and positive is a culture in the company, and this guy was a wet towel on this stuff is a little bit different than we might experience it in the United States. So I want to kind of fill that in. Not a French lawyer. We're evaluating this. That's kind of why I think kind of Business Insider and Washington Post don't go too depthfully into this, because it's like, I don't know, French labor law. Okay. But we can talk about it a little bit. Now, the first thing I wanted to talk about is, and maybe Ian, you could tell me whether whether Canada at all kind of goes to the Convention for the Protection of Human Rights on any of this stuff. We do get the site, which is something I always look for. If you're ever kind of reviewing these kinds of cases on your own, I always do try to find what are we looking at in law, because the court is supposed to be evaluating law. And so we've got their labor code, L1121-1, and Article 10, Section 1 of the Convention for the Protection of Human Rights, which we can look at here. You might recognize this. Article 10 is freedom of expression. And it's not necessarily limited to just the overall concept of freedom of expression, but what we'll see in this case is that this guy believes he was fired not really for not being fun. So we got the kind of standard headlines trying to make it simpler for people to understand, but for writing letters and critiques to management about how much he thinks it's a problem. And so he wants to say, you can't do that. That's my freedom of expression. And as we found with Twitter and other things in the United States, if you disagree with the boss in the United States about the culture or the direction of the company, for the most part, the law is not going to save you.
Yeah, you're getting fired.
Yeah, that there isn't a given right to have freedom of expression in the context of critiquing your company's decision-making or cultural positions outside of illegal stuff. Like I said, if you're whistleblowing, that kind of thing, you can get certain protections for that. So this is already taking a different tack, that this is even in their Supreme Court, than it would in the United States. You get to see those differences. This is one of the things I like to do in headlines, which is really kind of awesome, is kind of just evaluate these different approaches to these questions. And I'm sure some of you in the chat or in the comments will say, this is the right way to do it, and the United States is stupid. And others of you will say, this is, if I'm imagining myself running a small business and I hire one guy and that guy, comes off and management is dumb and here's what they should be doing and all this stuff. And you say, you know what, you're not a great fit for this. I wish you best of luck. And then getting sued and having it go to the Supreme Court as violating his freedom of expression. It's like, wow. You can imagine it the other way too, right? So the very first thing he tries to do is get what is translated as nullity of his dismissal. So man gets fired based on this, and he wants it overturned. Here's the court response, I believe.
Can they actually, they don't really do that in Canada. You can get the remedy of they pay you a bunch of stuff, but they don't usually give you the remedy of you are actually still employed.
Yeah, I think this is something that I would describe as seen more in Europe.
Usually people don't want that remedy if it was available.
Right.
Because, you've pissed off the boss, and now they're like, it's like, okay, you get your job back. Often in negotiation, this is one of the things they warn people about in labor law is if the company offers the job back as a conciliation, don't take it.
It's gonna be super uncomfortable.
Yeah, and they can just ruin your time through very subtle ways until you quit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's weird. It's kind of the analog to the law is often not going to reward what we call specific performance, right? Because it's just not. You commission somebody to make a really cool piece of art, and you don't like it, and they don't deliver it, and can you get the court to force them to make it for you is not ideal.
Yeah, and one of the places where they're super reluctant for specific performance is anything involving work.
Mm-hmm.
They will do specific performance sometimes for artworks, not I am going to make an art, but an artwork already exists, and
delivery.
And real estate is the other one where I understand, will sometimes do it.
In businesses in general, you saw that what was going to be the Twitter lawsuit was for specific performance. So
you must actually buy Twitter.
Yeah, as you get into that kind of sophisticated parties and it's just handing over money, that kind of thing that is more transactional in nature, you'll get specific performance a little bit more often. But it's if you have to do this thing, you have to commit your labor, especially if it's skill-based. Right. It's the court can't go and enforce that this guy isn't going to do a crap job for you. And so it gets into a real big problem. You don't want, not only do we not feel comfortable with kind of inching up on slavery, we've got an amendment, we fought a war, bad stuff on that from a court level. You you don't want this. We can't make him do a good job. So you get into that kind of conversation, and it's the exact same way. I want nullity in my dismissal. I want to work there. Oh, how do you think that's going to go for you?
I feel like, that's
now we've got Lord Zenu here saying, let's go state. I don't know which state, maybe all states, maybe all state. Don't know. President Palmer. Have no idea. But thank you, Lord Zenu, for that. Whatever state you're rooting for, I wish them the best of luck. I don't think we have any current states on our future. Maybe Georgia. Hard to say. And Tulip 2, which is $2 super chat. Thank you, Tulip 2. Really appreciate it. Now, Ian.
Maybe that's a theme. Like they super chat $2 because it's Tulip 2.
Tulip 2. It's the Tulip 2.
I like it. Branding. I think that's good commitment to a bit.
Yeah, no, I like it. I agree with that. William Hawkins says nullity dismissal probably relates to getting a severance package. If terminated for misconduct, you're out the door with no recompense. He wants to be terminated without misconduct. Okay. Possibly. You
think they'd have phrased that as just damages?
We'll talk about that. They are actually fighting over money, and it gets wildly unclear as this particular document goes on, just because of the way it's translated and everything else. Whoa, nobody's going to get that reference, Hoeg. See, that's the sad part about this from co-counsel. I don't know what reference she's talking about. I don't know what I said.
I don't remember either. So
I don't know what I referenced that nobody's going to get, honey, but I appreciate it. It's all good. It's all good. Now, I wanted to say this before we kind of get into the weeds here. Ian, have you ever had a situation where something related to work, for me, it's closing dinners is where these things kind of happen, but where you were supposed to go on a team building exercise or a retreat or just a celebratory meeting, and it got uncomfortable, or you didn't want to go and you felt pressured to do that?
So I've got a story from early in my working career. This is before I was doing anything law related. Okay. I was working for the small thing, and they were like, hey, we're meeting up at this, and what I took to be the name of a bar. And so I went there, and it was a strip club, and that was super uncomfortable. Because I'm not a strip clubs. I don't really understand the point. It seems to me like a restaurant where you walk in and they make steak, but you never actually eat steak. It's just they walk the, isn't this a great looking steak? And it's just gonna like go back into the kitchen. Like, I don't see the point of that. And ultimately it's just like, I feel like if you are a lonely person, that a strip club is the worst place for you because you'll just feel worse. So I was really not enjoying that. And I left earlier, and they were basically like, hey, you left early. And I was like, yeah, I wasn't feeling it. And they're like, well, now everyone else feels, embarrassed. And I'm going, but like, I never wanted to be there.
Right.
So I had that. I got a dressing down from a boss at one point because and this was the dumbest dressing down I ever got. So they had the office party, and like the office party had like Secret Santa and, drinking and all of this. Now, I was stuck. I had a trial, and we were getting to like 4:00, and we suggested to the judge, hey, we've probably got like another 4 hours of this. Can we like roll this on to another day? Mm-hmm. And the judge is like, no, we're finishing this today. It doesn't matter how long we have to be here. So I get out of rural court at 8 p.m. and I'm like, okay. So I drive out, back towards town. And then when I called the boss and was like, hey, is the party still going? And they're like, no. And also we need to see you in our office tomorrow. Like when you come in tomorrow, because they were upset that I didn't come into the party. They thought I'd blown them off. And I'm like, So yeah, I was in the point like in getting chewed out, and they're like, it's really important that you prioritize this. I'm like, I was in a trial. What do you want me to do? Like walk out and get a contempt of court citation? And they're like, you need to figure these things out better. I'm going,
You have a better excuse than I usually do, because I just have to be honest. I don't like these kinds of things. This is probably no surprise to anybody that watches me regularly, but I don't drink. There's a whole lot of reasons for that. And they really are, for the most part, a closing dinner or a mixer or any of these kinds of things. They're generally excuses to go and drink a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a judgment thing. It's not what I do. And to be honest, being in a room of drunk people as not drinking isn't always the most fun thing.
No, I mean, drunk people can sometimes be jerks, especially if they get the notion that you're not drinking and then start trying to hand you a glass of something. And you're
yes,
like,
I have a lot of Diet Cokes in my day because they can at least sub for one.
Well, I mean, law firms also often have like drinking parties, and sometimes you're like the new lawyer and you're trying to be careful. So I may have had a few bars where I've instructed them to be like, yeah, just I'll keep ordering Caesars and you keep serving them with no booze in them, please.
Yeah. Well, one of the most eye-opening, where you think about Mad Men or whatever, I'm on an interview at a very large law firm. And I'm in one of the partners' offices, and they go to the back cabinet, and they pull out whatever it was. I can't even remember, Maker's Mark, whatever it was.
Yeah,
they pull out stuff and starts pouring, and it's like, okay, so now I have a poured glass on an interview with a partner, okay, so what do we do with this? So that was fun, but it really did remind me. It's like, okay, now this is interesting. This particular firm I'm looking at, they didn't even think about this. They didn't it wasn't something that crossed their mind. So now you know something about them, right? You know something about that environment, or at least this partner. And it's like, okay, if it didn't even cross your mind to ask, that's a concern.
Yeah, that tells me something about the corporate culture. And I'll give this warning to, because sometimes I see people in chat and so forth saying, I'm going into law school and so forth. And I'll warn people, like, often when you're a new lawyer, you're sort of looking for any job.
Yeah.
You can end up being really miserable in law if you get a bad job. And it can be really easy to get a job that is worse than being unemployed. So law has high rates of burnout in various ways, and you don't want to be the person who has, who finds yourself in a place that you just hate your life. So make choices on that. Yeah.
So it's interesting to me, because I can totally see where this kind of thing comes from.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, certainly this is the corporate lawyer in me. I do say, well, I don't know whether you're describing these things accurately or not, Mr. Fired person. And I do think that employers have an interest in trying to make sure that there is a collaborative atmosphere and that there's a general culture direction that you kind of focus on. So it's like, well, this is interesting. I also wanted to flag here that Matthew here says he wasn't fired for misconduct. Professional inadequacy is a legitimate reason to fire in fairness, but it's not misconduct. Misconduct is not going to work, stealing money, stealing things from the company. And so, yeah, this is one of those where it's like, that's totally fair. You would never justify this. In fact, the labor lawyer that in America is operating, and you're saying, well, we want to fire this guy. If they ask, clients don't usually ask on something like this. Clients. If they ask, you'd say, no, you don't say anything. You refer to the contract. You say it's at will. You say we're exercising our rights under that provision, and you don't give reasons that can be turned against.
In Canada, you're often very careful. Like, employers are often very careful to say, we're terminating your employment, and please direct any questions to our legal counsel, and legal counsel will be like, you know,
we didn't fire you.
yeah, it's like,
We don't know.
so yeah, they're just very careful to try to not give reasons, because typically it's hard to sue over I got fired for no reason, but it's real easy to sue for I got fired for a specific bad reason.
Right. And that's where you, especially in America, you get into they fired me because I was old. Like you'll have some person say, oh, they were past this age, or you know, if you're really looking at a payday, you know, they said, well, we don't want pregnant people here. Make good choices, employers.
A friend of mine who was a labor lawyer, who was celebrating because he took a file on commission, and when they got the the discovery, there was a whole lot of commentary. Basically, they said we need to identify people in front-facing positions who are not in sort of ideal demographics for bringing in customers.
Yep.
And then the other person said something like, what does that mean? And they were like, fire the Black people and the Indigenous people. And like, they said it real clear. And he's like, I am celebrating because the dollar amounts on this are going to be big.
Yep. No. And you think employers are good enough at this stuff to understand they can't do that. Or if you're more cynically minded, you think employers are good enough to code those messages more successfully. But it's a good thing, A, that they aren't in the latter area, but two, it's not that they will go out there and do these things. I mean, like that's the entire practice of labor law, is dealing with employers doing stupid stuff. So, all right, let's get back to this just real quickly. Like I said, there isn't a ton to actually dive into here. We looked at the Convention for Freedom of Expression, and then France has what you would consider a kind of normal type of law or legal approach here. No one may place restrictions on the rights of persons and individual and collective freedoms that are not justified by the nature of the task to be performed or proportionate to the aim sought. You can ask for things. Obviously, you're giving up a certain amount of freedom working. You've agreed to it in exchange for money. But they can't ask you to do things that are outside essentially the scope of your employment. And so that's where this fight really lives. In order to dismiss the employee's request for the nullity of his dismissal, the judgment, after noting that he was accused in particular of his refusal to accept the company's policy, as well as his disagreement on the methods of management of the partners and critics of their decision. See, this part is probably more important. And that's not as cool of a headline. Right?
Like, I wonder what exactly he was saying, right? Because there's ways to like, you can say, hey, I don't want to go to these parties, you know, whatever else. And, you know, you shouldn't make me go to these parties. Like, okay, that's one thing. But if you're like, hey, you guys are a bunch of idiots and a bunch of alcoholics, and, you know, it's stupid that you're making me go to these, and I hate you. Like, that's a different statement.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you can't, you'd have reason to fire someone that was just completely separate in culture. It doesn't mean that they're bad either way, by the way. In this case, it does, or at least the lower court finds it. It emerges from various documents submitted, in particular certificates from employees, so interviews with the other people, that the fun and pro in force in the company also resulted in necessary participation in seminars and weekend drinks, frequently generating excessive alcoholism among all participants. So at least as it sounds, they had other employees kind of back this up. Yeah. Encouraged by the associates who made available very large quantities of alcohol. So the associates here is a little bit, we'd love to see this in like the original language. That might be the firm itself where you get into real trouble. It might be other people coming into the parties. Alcohol being mentioned in particular in the restitution of the Cubic 2011 Culture Workshop. I do love it, by the way, if it is just a drinking party and they called it their Culture Workshop. And by practices advocated by the partners linking promiscuity, bullying, and incitement to various excesses and excesses, which is a translation, whatever. So yes, what do we mean by promiscuity, bullying, and incitement? Don't know, but that's kind of the state of play as we head into this particular.
I feel like the promiscuity is kind of potentially the big issue, right?
It could be. It could
Because
also be referencing drinking. I mean, like when you translate across languages like that, you can have promiscuous drinking. It comes across as sexualized to us. That's a sexualized word. I'm just not willing to commit to that based on like, Google Translate and the way this is coming across.
Yeah.
But we'll get there in just a second. He holds that the criticisms made of the employee in the letter of dismissal cannot be considered as a violation of his freedom of expression, such as to render the dismissal null and void. This is the lower court, so that he is really it. That in fact, he is criticized for his refusal to accept company policy and comply with operating procedures based on small teams in which cooperation through frequent exchanges is valued on the sharing of fun and pro, and I think that's positive values, by all employees of the company. So the nature of this is, look, it isn't that he isn't going to drinking, it's that he isn't a part of the team. And if you're not a part of the team, we need to be able to cut that out of the company. And that's the finding. And so ruling when it had found that the dismissal was in part based on critical behavior of the employee and his refusal to accept the company's policy based on sharing the values of fun and pro, but also the incitement to various excesses, which are part of his freedom of expression and opinion without an abuse in the exercise of this freedom being characterized, the Court of Appeal, which did not draw the legal consequence of its finding, violated the aforementioned text. So this court is going and saying that the Court of Appeals did some things wrong. I think, if I'm reading this correctly, and God help me, by ignoring some of the laws that require you to actually analyze this stuff. So they dismiss the cross appeal, and then they say they dismiss Mr. T's claims for the nullity of his dismissal for the purpose of ordering his reinstatement in his position. So that doesn't happen despite this exactly. And they award damages. And then they fight about 461,000 euros is what he asked for.
Wow.
I don't know. I don't know the current going currency conversion rate, but at least
that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
What was this guy's job? Like God Emperor of the Universe?
Well, so he's director at a place. So that's probably pretty high up there. I think director is a little bit closer to officer in this context, but officer is a big deal.
Yeah.
So these allures Q, if you're not familiar with French, that is basically your whereas clauses.
Yeah.
So it says, whereas Mr. T could not be blamed for his failure to integrate to these values of the company, which resulted in the necessary participation in excessive alcoholism and all this crap, promiscuity, bullying, and incitement. Whereas Mr. T argued that this culture prevailing in the company was characterized by humiliating and intrusive practices in his private life, such as mock sexual acts. There you get their promiscuity.
Yeah, that's concerning.
Whereas it is known as undermining a fundamental freedom constitutionally guaranteed, the dismissal occurred due to the exercise by the employee of his freedom of expression. This isn't what you want to hear if you're the employer, as the Supreme Court goes on here. And then they kind of separate this out. And I don't know whether this is a formatting issue again in this context. They go to the next ground of appeal. So we don't actually get the conclusions of this. So we're going to go back to the articles written in English for us. But that's how it goes throughout. No employee can be dismissed for having related facts constitutive of moral harassment. They talk about the letters. And then they also give at least some voice to, this is the company saying essentially shouldn't be 400,000 euros, should be about 3,000 in paid leave. It's a difference there.
Yeah, that's you might still call that a loss.
Yeah. So it continues on here. They're talking about how to count this, whether it was overtime, if we're not allowed to dismiss him for that, all these various things. Here's another sum. They say it should be 4,000 for this compensatory rest, 481 for related paid leave. And so all of this is fighting over numbers. We go back to this summary here. And so it's a win for him. Like that's the basic thing that you can find is that, and we'll talk about why this headline is maybe a little bit understated.
It's a win, but it's kind of a.
Yes, we're going to get to the numbers. You're exactly right, Ian. You're ready.
Yeah.
You're lined up for what this court found. The ruling comes after a man referred to as Mr. T was fired from the Paris consultancy firm Cubic Partners. So they're a consultancy. So they're making a lot of money, maybe saying nothing. You know how it is, consultants. In 2015 for refusing to participate in after-work drinks and team building activities. I know there's probably some consultants in the chat. We love you, consultants. Sometimes you were very useful. Oftentimes you were taking advantage of large law firms to give them no particular advice and then putting a $250,000 bill in front of them. I have seen that.
I've seen some consultant reports where I was like, we should sue these people for fraud.
There you go. That's Ian, I know. According to the court documents, Mr. T joined the firm. We got all that, the background. According to the court, the company's fund values included regular obligatory social events that culminated in excessive alcoholism encouraged by colleagues who made very large quantities of alcohol available. So this is in quotes. I don't know if colleagues is a better fit for that phrase that we were looking at. We saw associates in the way Google translated it. Practices pushed by colleagues involving promiscuity, bullying, and incitement to various excesses. The court, the highest in the French legal system, so they did eventually get there, also outlined various humiliating and intrusive practices promoted by cubic partners, including simulations of sexual acts and the obligation to share a bed with a colleague. I didn't see that.
That's
summarizing. So
that's kind of bearing the lead.
Yeah, that's in a judgment issued on November 9th, so a couple of weeks ago, the court found that because Mr. T's lack of participation in the company's fund values and critical behavior were reasons cited for his dismissal, he had been wrongfully fired. The court ruled that Mr. T was exercising his freedom of expression by refusing to participate in the company's social activities, and that performing this fundamental freedom could not be a reason for his dismissal. Again, I think they miss the fact that he's actually openly criticizing management on this at the time. It's not like he just skipped the parties. Cubic Partners did not respond immediately to comment from Business Insider. That's not a big surprise.
Yeah.
Mr. T's demand of 461,000 euros, just south of $500,000 US, was previously rejected by the Paris Court of Appeals in 2021, but the recent ruling by the Court of Cassation partially overturned this judgment. The court ordered Cubic to pay Mr. T 3,000 euros and will examine damages at a later stage. So they have a kind of partial. That's where you see that kind of reference to partial. They go halfway through and say, we'll come back for the number. So he gets 3,000. That's what they are sure of that he gets. And we're going to talk about this $500,000. So it's not exactly a loss, but it does sound like you don't start purchasing your Lamborghinis just yet.
Yeah, this is not party time.
Well, and this is a person that knows when it's not party time.
And yeah, fair. I'm just thinking, like, sometimes you see newspaper articles that really don't understand court. And like one of them that I can think of was they were reporting on this decision where this guy won $100. The decision was in his favor for $100 with costs to the other side.
Oh, no.
Which is something that they can do, like that they have discretion here in Canada. It wasn't a win. It was like, technically you are correct in law, but you were also such a jerk that it was like tens of thousands going back the other way, but he's nominally the winner. And so the newspaper reported it as he wins. And I'm like, does he though? So, yeah.
Well, I think I was reading an article, I think that you had linked to, or you had commented on Twitter about an advocacy group in Canada being forced to pay for costs on something related to like mandates and things like that. And I was like, wow, that's a big deal for a nonprofit organization to be ordered to pay their opponents' legal costs.
Yeah, I mean, Canada does costs a lot more than the US does.
Okay.
Like, in Canada, the usual rule is that costs follow the verdict, right? So whichever side wins, usually the other side pays costs, but it's not always the case.
Right. Well, and the philosophical fight that you have across jurisdictions there is that you don't want to disincentivize legitimately possible legal claims. That you get costs in the United States for you're frivolous and you're crazy. Don't do that. But otherwise, it's like, well, if it's in the gray area at all, we don't want people to not come with that. So that's just kind of it's a value proposition based on what country you're looking at. So I imagine, at least on the margins, there's somebody that could have a colorable legal claim that says, I can't risk it if I have to pay $150,000 and the other side's legal costs. So it's interesting. It's an interesting conversation. That's what I like about these headlines. It's like, well, that's interesting in France because you could definitely have, based on some of the stuff mentioned there, you could definitely have like a harassment complaint. You could definitely have a report to whatever your equivalent state EEOC body is. You could have these kinds of things based on what's described, but you wouldn't necessarily have an action for dismissal unless it was like following that whistleblower action, because then all hell breaks loose. If you're one of the reporting people and then they fire you and they have to make some, it's a whole thing. But in France here, you don't see that. I see questions in the chat. It's like, well, couldn't you bring a sexual harassment complaint or something along those lines? Well, the sharing of the bed is you don't actually have the thing that ties you to harassment there, at least as alleged. But absolutely you could, but that doesn't mean that you have to. This particular individual said, I want the salary. Potentially I want my job back if that's what's required to get the salary. And that's the fight he wants to have. Doesn't want to go to the parties, criticize his management about the parties. And then management said, you're not cubic material. To which you probably said, you're right. But you're not allowed to. I
agree. Cubic material seems to. And I mean, the thing about sharing a bed is that I don't really know necessarily what that means in this context, because that's one of those things where it's like that could mean that they are basically expecting people to sleep with each other in the non-sleeping fashion. Or it could just mean like, hey, we just aren't paying for enough beds. And
right. Well, but the first thing that jumps into my head, this is sad, is like, oh, they're being cheap at a motel. They're being cheap at the hotel where their retreat is or their party is.
And I mean, I have had to fight with law firms where they're like, you and an assistant are going to a conference, or like you and a junior female lawyer are going to, an out of town like extensive court thing, and you're going to share a hotel room. And I'm like, and we're not though. Like right. That's just a no. So
no, I hear that. And Nicholas, thank you for the super chat. I will hopefully have a great 5th year of content. The 5-year anniversary, just to give you kind of some of the behind the scenes of the channel, was always where in the back of my head I said, we are going to evaluate on the 5-year anniversary as to whether this makes sense to keep going, to do these various things. It obviously does at this point. But Ian, when he was talking earlier in the video, anybody that starts this, law firms are asking me about this all the time. It's like, understand you're gonna question the use of your time and life choices for like at least a year, because it'll be to 12 people. It'll be like, what am I doing? You're a lawyer. You should be billing this time. That kind of thought process. So, yeah.
Well, and plus you get stuff like just random people, like, especially when you start to get some traction, you get people going like, isn't this bad for your brand? And I'm like, no. Like it's complicated.
It is. So, well, you also get the people that are just, it's like, oh, if you were a real lawyer, you wouldn't be on YouTube. It's like, I enjoy having these conversations. I don't know what that distinguishes from anything else that I otherwise do. Life is too short, folks, to get told you shouldn't do something because it looks bad or because you're not a real lawyer or whatever on these things. It's
yeah. And the other really obnoxious thing about all of that is like, I do the YouTube because I want to I would like to one day get to a point where I can do the real lawyering for free rather than sending people bills. And right, that would be my goal, is just to, I'm a real lawyer. I hate billing. Like that is so, if I can do the lawyering entirely like supported by people who actually want to send me money, as opposed to like, I will, lose my life if I don't have this guy's help, then I just want to help people who can't otherwise afford it. That's my goal. And yeah, so that stuff always just annoys the heck out of me, because I'm just like,
so you have to get used to that, certainly. And it's a transition period. These kinds of platforms, this kind of content, these kinds of conversations are still really young. And law firms are notoriously slow to adopt basically anything in terms of technology changes, marketing, whatever it might be. And I'm happy to tell you, this channel started as like, well, let's make sure people know the firm is out there. Hopefully I present as a smart person that you might think of hiring. So it was a marketing kind of thing. And it's grown from there. But it's still, you have to like doing it. And if you're talking to somebody that's going to start it, it's like, yeah, as Ian said, you might get a death threat on something completely silly. And you're going to get some trolls, and you're going to get people saying, well, you must not have enough clients or enough to do or whatever. And it's an interesting life. I think EDB says it's a very strange world. And I think that's very accurate. So,
I certainly didn't know what I was getting into when I started.
No, ain't that the truth? It's like, I'm just going to talk into this microphone and we're going to say some things about Fallout 76. And, maybe, I guess some people will like it. And then it's 1,000 videos later and you're like, well, thank you for the super chat on this live stream show that I do in the mornings now. And as we enter the 5th year, it's crazy, but I really appreciate it, Nicholas. I really do. And we also got Maxime here talking a little bit about France. So people can be let go in France, but most contracts have a severance package. Sure. Being fired removes the burden on the company to deliver the severance package. It's kind of the same deal. It's kind of a cause notion. Even if you're at will, you can have bonuses, severance for getting fired without cause in the United States. And that sounds like a similar kind of concept here in France. So that's good to know, Maxime. I really appreciate it.
There's a super chat that's got a lot of useful info right there.
Okay. All right. We will
just right at the bottom there.
I will get there. I want to make sure I don't skip anybody. Ashram, was he on the clock for these parties? I wonder. That's kind of what he's arguing, right? If it's a mandate, then he should be. He should be on the clock. And that's one of the things they're fighting about in those paragraphs I skipped, because I don't have expertise in French law on these topics, and it's kind of inside baseball. It's where these numbers are. Maxime says associates equals partners. Maxime has said, I saw in an earlier chat, that associates is the reference to people that have equity in an enterprise. Fired equals removals with no severance package. Dismissal is justified economic, personal, or mutual consent with a severance package. So the fight here does seem to be legitimately, like, it sounds like he wanted to work there again. And that's interesting in and of itself. So thank you, Maxime. I really appreciate it. Like I said, know enough to be dangerous on this stuff. And of course, as part of headlines, we're always analyzing whether they give us the whole story. And I think for the most part, both the Washington Post, Business Insider, a number of other places covered this. They went for the easy kind of comedic, oh, that's a funny thing. Right? French man wins right to not be fun at work, which is a part of it. But it's also, he's accusing them of all sorts of chicanery at these parties and not being comfortable with it, and criticizes the company openly. And that leads into this kind of freedom of expression. It's why he won as much as he did, I think, is it's like, well, they kind of say it's about firing you for what you said to management. And I think it's probably at least a little bit more closely analyzed if it's just you don't show up at parties. So in any event, thank you so much to Maxime for jumping in on this with some French knowledge. And like I said, the Wall Street Journal, I keep wanting to call them the Wall Street Journal. The Washington Post says basically the same stuff, almost paragraph for paragraph, the Business Insider. And then they bring in some more. I'm always interested in what these companies, the masthead media here, do for like extra color. Like Washington Post is not happy with just this, which is just very short. Here's what happened. And nobody responds to us for comments. The Washington Post kind of adds this, talking just in general about drinking. It's not the first time a company's drinking culture has come under the microscope in court proceedings. A number of recent incidents have highlighted the entrenchment of alcohol in white-collar professional culture, even after the Me Too movement shone a spotlight on workplace misconduct globally. Some firms have introduced booze chaperones at company events in hoping of avoiding such issues. Now, obviously, even though this is about like multiple jurisdictions, Washington Post is starting to bring in Americanism here.
Yeah.
Right. So talking about America stuff in particular, and I will tell you this, I said this when we were going over some of the kind of Johnny Depp stuff that we were seeing and some of the other things that we've seen with Activision in California, is that if you go talk to the legal counsel, general counsel, outside counsel for a company now, whether in video games or somewhere else, even if it's a hip, cool industry, and they talk about having a keg at the reception desk, which some of them do, you're going to get from the lawyers, no, don't do that. Don't have beer parties on the office grounds. Don't bring in a keg to have as fully available, because it does lead to these kinds of stories. And this is how lawyers get their reputation as being wet blankets. It's easy enough to see, oh, you're just adding liability. You're not getting kind of what you want out of it. If you're providing the alcohol, you also get into like weird dram shop law stuff. If one of your employees, accidentally hit somebody on the way home, exactly what was your responsibility as a company? You got all this stuff that gets dragged into this. And so there are workplaces that have this kind of mentality, and that is changing. It's actually arguably changed mostly in the last 2 decades before all of this. But it is still something that the Washington Post wants to discuss. An auditor at PricewaterhouseCoopers in England sued the company over severe injuries he sustained at a work event that made a competitive virtue of excessive drinking in a lawsuit filed in London's High Court this year. Michael Brockie fell down in the street, went into a coma, and later had part of his skull removed after participating in the company event, the Post reported. And then we can get into all sorts of philosophical fights about this, right? Because it's like, okay, if he's at a company event, how much was the company responsible for his actions at that event? Did they make the alcohol available? Did they actually make it a competitive virtue to excessively drink? Is there a board member with a megaphone yelling chug, chug, chug? And where does the company's responsibility and the individual's agency end is part of this story? But it's also something that's easily avoided. This is why HR or the lawyers say, don't go down this road at all. And so that's why if you do get mad at the lawyers or HR on these kinds of topics, it's because of stories like this. In March, insurance marketplace Lloyd's of London fined member firm Atrium Underwriters a record £1 million for serious failures, including a boys' night out, where employees, among them 2 senior executives, took part in inappropriate initiation games and heavy drinking and made sexual comments about female colleagues. And honestly, in the modern kind of human resources zeitgeist, this is where you're going to get into real trouble.
If you ask a lawyer, can we do something, and the next word is initiation, or it comes up in the next phrase, they're going to be like, good, no.
Thank you for asking me that and not putting it in an email. Also, no.
Yeah. And if you do it anyway, please expect to pay all the money.
Right. That's when the lawyer says, I think I should write down that we had that conversation. Excellent.
Yep. And that I advised against it. And I also said, that you will have to pay all the money.
And then here's a random aside to finish off the article at the Washington Post. France is among the world's most liberal countries in terms of alcohol consumption. The legal minimum age for consuming alcohol in public is 18, but there is no regulation of alcohol consumption in private. Okay, Washington Post?
Neat.
Fair enough. Also, I'm not entirely certain exactly how many United States jurisdictions have regulation of alcohol consumption in private. Probably not as many as you think.
Also, are any of these people underage, or is this just completely irrelevant?
There's no reason to believe they're underage. This is just kind of like a dump on France at the end. I don't know.
That is an American tradition.
It just seems it's a non sequitur. So, by the way, those French people are very different from you or I. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I don't. So I did think that was funny, because fully half this article is like, look at all these times drinking has caused trouble. Yeah, true, Washington Post, true. But yeah, they don't have anything more than the other article. They just kind of fleshed it out with extra stuff. And so, that I wanted to talk about that as kind of headlines. I want to talk about a fun story to get us back rolling on this kind of stuff. I wanted to talk about some of those stories that I mentioned, being offered drinks at my interview with the law firm. Certainly, it certainly would have been viewed badly. I would have had a closed door meeting. I might have had a closed door meeting. It's a long career, about not going to a closing dinner. You're supposed to make the clients feel good about the bill you just gave them. That kind of thing is part and parcel to that process. And it was never very much fun. And so what's funny is that you do have those circumstances where closing dinner can go for 6 hours. And I definitely left early for the most part. Early being 3 hours at a closing dinner to go see if I could catch my kids before they went to sleep and things like that. And I definitely got talked to about that kind of participation and the need to.
Yeah. Are you sure you're a team player if you're not staying the whole time?
Right, that kind of thing, and lightly, because the partners at my firm were a lot smarter than some of these things you see referenced. Much more close to like, you sure you're dedicated to this, that kind of thing, right? And I've said this story before. This literally did happen, but later on in my career, there would be you can either be a family man or a firm man. It's like, well, okay, good to know. All right.
Yep. Goodbye.
Well, that is literally the day when I started planning my exit. I mean, it literally is. That is how it went.
Yeah. Employers never ask somebody to choose between their kids and your for because why would you even want to keep the person who makes that other choice?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to some extent, big law firms want the gear in the machine that has no other wants, needs, or desires, and is willing to give all to the firm. But it was easy for me. As I like to describe it, it sounded like a Disney villain. Like, it was just so over the top. I was like, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I would have said this is unrealistic.
Did he actually just say that? Okay, neat.
Well, it's funny because it was with my senior partners at the room that was for like the evaluation. It was like an end of year evaluation. And then I went over to my mentor and I was like, so that just happened. And I'm going to be working on leaving. Like, that's what I did. And
your mentor was probably like,
oh yeah,
fair play.
Nope. My mentor was like, yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, and then it took a year and a half. Like, I'm a lawyer. I'm very risk averse. I'm trying to plan out all the steps. But it was, that was exactly what happened in that context. Nicholas has a comment: bit behind. EU constitution has to be integrated into EU members' fundamentals. EU constitution trumps individual members' constitutional. EU court is like your SCOTUS simplified. Right. So the French highest court is not necessarily the highest jurisdiction on some of this stuff. But it certainly sounds like it's in line with the European conventions for what they were looking at in this particular story. Thank you for that, Nicholas. I appreciate it. Certainly, it's always interesting to see other kind of judicial frameworks. Tim Riggs: poor decision making knows no rank. That is true. That is absolutely true. Poor decision making can exist at all levels. That you don't need to be the new associate. You got senior partners doing all sorts of stupid stuff. And the law firm want an emotionless robot. Where are my robot lawyers, Hoeg? The problem is when you get up to a certain level that has that conversation or one like it, you're going to get a certain type of lawyer. And so you maybe aren't going to be happy with that. They're not robots necessarily, but they've made life choices. And I always tell this to people: you got to make your own choices. Nobody's going to protect you from overwork from a law firm. No one's going to be able to stop you from doing whatever it is that they ask. So you got to be able to evaluate those things on your own. That was when I was a mentor. They will take everything you give them. So you have to figure out exactly how willing you are to do that and where your borderlines are. So that's the way of things. At least in the United States, it's at least a big law. And obviously I got out of there. So I'm of a certain type of personality anyway. But it is interesting. It's interesting. I don't regret my time. But I'm very glad I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
So Ian, I just wanted to say thank you for coming here and hanging out with us this morning.
Thank you for sort of giving me something to do that's a little more productive with my insomnia.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about it. Honestly, I wish I wish you were getting more sleep.
It's the nature of life. Sometimes it's when you got back pain and attention deficit, it's sort of one of those things where you're just like, yep, this is going to happen sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I'm very sorry to hear it. You got anything going on this week?
Nothing super interesting. The video I'm working on right now is I think it's going to be a fun one.
Good.
It's about a U.S. case that nobody else is really covering because it's a weird gun case. Okay. there's some interesting allegations about what the whether they've been properly responding to document requests and so forth. And, you know, how big of a deal is it if you don't provide documents you were supposed to?
If you just ignore the court orders?
Yeah, like just like, hey, these documents are inconvenient. Let's just not. Is that a thing that you can do?
I'm interested in hearing more about that in your video, Ian.
Because, yeah, it's that's the kind of thing that gets it's a way to turn a bad legal case into a really interestingly bad legal case.
Some people think they're above the law. There's certainly no question there.
Yeah, and these are not like irrelevant documents. They're like, hey, the stuff that completely tortures our case, we decided not to share. It's like,
I think you could argue that some of the games that Elon Musk and his team were playing with respect to the Twitter deal in October led to the outcome that you saw. Like the court was clearly getting upset about their discovery deliveries. And I think that's part of why he decides to say, all right, fine.
Yeah.
All right, Mrs. Hoeg Law, before we finish off today, wanted to flag for me a specific question, knock on the door and everything. So she says, great question. Sibling Creature asks, did you ever envision live streaming with others when you started? And how did that change things when you started that? All right, Sibling Creature and co-counsel, of course. I would say the answer to that is no. So I had a couple of goals when I started Virtual Legality, and one of them was to be able to fit them into my workday. So that involved a couple of things that you could certainly see throughout, especially the first 3 years of Virtual Legality. One, I didn't want to have to deal with a camera because I didn't want to have to think about multiple things, and it always takes a little bit of extra setup. Now I figured that out. It's not perfect. I certainly don't look as awesome as some of my colleagues with their super high definition cameras. You just can go look at, you can see Law and Lumber's pores if you want to, and he does all this stuff.
And you know that there's people in the chat who definitely want to.
Anytime we can zing Rob, I think it's worth it. It's worth it to spend the time. Yeah, no, and so mine is still a cheapo Logitech camera. It now has a light because people were complaining about my shadows and things like that. But early days of Virtual Legality was, how can you get from farm to table as quickly as possible? No video. Try to do it in one take. Limited editing, kind of almost a podcast format with a visual aid type style. And so it was never really the intent of the channel to go and do live streaming and then, or to be on with people. In fact, it took me a while to figure out buttons, and StreamYard has been great at that. We complain about StreamYard because it's not perfect, but it is video streaming and broadcasting for dummies. And I love it. I couldn't do any of this without as easy as it is on StreamYard. And so I think that the way the story goes is like sometime, I want to say at the tail end of year 2, Lita of Legal Bites contacts me and says, do you want to do something together? And I don't even remember the context really, but she reaches out to me.
And you're like, no, that's not what I do.
Well, because I think at that point in time, Nate and Kurt had reached out to me, and I was just like, I do these very specific kind of podcast type things. I get them out. I prep everything and I talk over them, and I'm like, I'm not really a trial lawyer. I don't know what y'all want to talk about. And Alita sends things. I checked on it. Alita sends a couple of video clips, which the interesting thing about this, you want the full behind the scenes on all this is like, people ask me to be on podcasts. People ask me to come on the channel, all these kind of things. Like I always ask for what I talk about as a representative sample of like what they're about. And I watch them or listen to them. And Alita was just getting started, and I was like, I think this is a good voice to have on YouTube. I need to figure out these buttons anyway, not to take anything away from you, Alita. But part of it was I should figure out how to do this if and when it made sense. I had somebody asking me to review a book, then they wanted the authors to come on, which you can also go and see that video from about that time. And I'm like, all right, I need to figure out more buttons. So Alita comes on, and it's like, oh, that worked out well. But I'm still, again, I'm a lawyer. I'm a corporate lawyer. I'm a risk-averse person. So it's like, I'm still like, I can't control what people say on my channel. So I get a little bit concerned. And so I basically don't have anybody on after that for a while. And then I get invites. I get an invite to Nick's Rittenhouse stream. I go on that. That kind of dovetails into working more with people. I think shortly before that, I meet Emily.
I kind of started, and I basically knew about one legal channel, which was like Leonard French.
Right. I've been on Leonard French's channel. He's very nice to the channel.
I've reached out to him, but I've never been on his channel. He's just kind of scatterbrained like I am.
Yeah, he is.
So but he's like, yeah, let's do that. And then he forgets about it. And I'm like, okay, cool.
That you do get used to that as well, which is like we set up a lot of stuff halfway.
We've been trying to do like a proper video game, like set up like a proper.
We're going to do that. We are going to do that. 2023. Ian and Rick hang out and talk about nothing but video games or nerd stuff.
But I didn't actually know a lot of other channels existed until I started getting people saying you need to get in touch with Viva Fry and go on his channel. So I sent him a message, and what often happens when you message big creators, which is they don't notice it.
Sure.
And so people eventually started telling Viva that he had to like have me on, and he's like, I'm kind of embarrassed because I went to message you and I saw that you had already messaged me some time ago and I missed it. And I was like, I get it, man. Like, it's all good. So I went on his channel, and then from there I found out, like, I got people going, you need to go on Nick Rekieta's channel. And I was like, so I watched that. I saw he was doing the Rittenhouse coverage, and I'm like, this is super cool. So I sent him a message, and I mean, he had every right to say like, hey, you're a Canadian, with like a, I had a much smaller following, like, go away. But yeah, I mean, but live streaming with other people is kind of terrifying. I've had some bad experiences.
Yeah, you never know what somebody's going to say, especially with you on stream, and how to handle that. And there's always interesting circumstances.
Yeah, I went on like a very small creators channel, and I was just like, nope, you guys are advocating committing crimes. Please don't. Like, not while I'm here.
Yeah. And that's the real risk. So I will say that the answer is no, because I'm it's just I like control over messaging and whatever it might be. And so it was always something where it's like, okay, what do I do with that? And you can see even in the last year, I don't need to give additional details, I don't think, that things have happened with me on stream, things have happened on this channel with people saying, that person said X and you didn't properly castigate them, or things along those lines. And almost always polite DMs, and we have good conversations, but it's a trick.
And so I mean, people really expect you to police what your sort of guests say, and sometimes that's hard because it's like your guests have opinions, and you're not necessarily responsible for the opinions of everyone in the universe.
No, exactly. And Tim Riggs says, I found you and Leonard were my first legal channels on YouTube. That's either me or you, Ian. People find folks in different ways. We got references to some of the podcasts that I do. First place I found you was Work to Game podcast about the Blizzard explosion. I've done those. Joshua says I couldn't escape Legal hitting the mainstream. Right. So that's a few years ago. Legal, as I've often said in this space, has been nothing but kind to the channel, including when I did a video that was called Legal's Wrong on COPPA.
I've had no interaction with Legal at all.
It's how we met. I did a video saying he's wrong, and he took it in stride.
I mean, that's sort of the ideal for lawyers, right? Because we deal with so much, disagreement in our practices and so forth.
Yeah.
I actually had a lawyer quite recently where we had a very pronounced disagreement. Like we had strong feelings about a legal issue, and ultimately he came back and he's like, you were right on this one. And I mean, it could have been either way.
Sure.
And he's like, let me say thank you. And sort of, we just sort of hung out and had a beer, because it was like,
Well, that's ideal. Reasonable minds can differ. You don't have to believe the other side is acting in bad faith. You have a different opinion. Lawyers, I would like to think, are more used to that than most. I tend to tell people, you got 4 lawyers, you're going to get 6 opinions. But it's it's interesting because you also have what I would describe as bad lawyering on the YouTubes and things like that, where people do just stick in the mud and ad hominem attack other folks. And I think you got to be careful about that. And you got to be careful because I don't want ad hominem attacks on the channel. And it's a trick. It is a trick to try to do, and every single time, basically, I'm a little bit concerned about it. Here you go. This is legal to EDB to Nate Alita and uncivil to Hoeg. There you go.
Yeah,
and then presumably from Hoeg to Ian, if you didn't already know Ian, Katie.
People have different sort of paths to figuring out like what's out there, right?
Yeah. That's exactly how my experience is with like movie criticism or whatever else I'm looking at online, right? It's like you just go and you find things and you collaborate and you work with people. And certainly there's value in that. But you do want to try to match things up. There are places where I think you can have audience mismatches. I think you can have instances where it's not a great fit and then people get upset on either side of those kinds of things. I didn't mean for this to become like a behind the scenes on like running a YouTube channel, but there are so many considerations that we all think about. It's one of the reasons we're like on a chat is like this weird thing and this weird thing and this weird thing. And it is harder than it looks if we're doing things right. Sometimes we make it look pretty hard, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird world sometimes. It's a weird, and then...
Did I lose you? We lost Ian for a second. We'll do Renee's super chat while Ian gets his mic up. Hope Runkle can do pro bono work soon. I think he already does pro bono work, but that he could do it like as his thing. White heart emoji. That's awesome, Renee.
I just hope to one day be able to do that exclusively. Like just, I run a firm where I send no bills. Is kind of the goal. But yeah, it's weird. The sort of like when you say audience clash, like I've had that in a big way because, I do gun stuff and I also, so, I get people sometimes in the chat who are like, I like your content on this, but I hate your opinion on guns. I'm like, I'm just going to tell you, I have opinion like on anything. There's going to be people who disagree with me. And,
I don't want to, make too bold a pronouncement here, but I'm willing to guarantee that we don't agree on everything in law or otherwise.
Oh, I mean,
all I have to do is say immortality.
I was going to say there's some video games we could mention, but like even just within your audience, sometimes you'll have disagreements when you're like, I hold to certain legal principles. Like I was at the Depp trial and I'd walk out and I'd be like, I thought Rittenborn actually had the right argument in his closing here.
Yep.
I don't, and I think he moved the needle a little bit. And I had like 500 angry messages. And I'm going, okay. But like, that's what I
job.
think. Like,
that's the job.
That was actually my legal analysis on this. Like, you just want me to tell you stuff. And I mean, I'm not going to name any names because I don't like drama, but there were some people who sometimes were like, all of this stuff, everything is always the best case outcome. And I'm going, that's never how law works.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I've said that before. I said, look, here's the deal. If I'm to have any value at all, I'm going to have to give my honest opinion. And I had a moment like that while covering it on Alita's Legal Bites channel. Where they transitioned into Amber Heard's case, and I say, "Well, look, there's space here. I'm interested in hearing what she has to say, and those kinds of things." And I got a bunch of messages. It's like it's obvious as all heck. It's like, well, part of that is because a lot of folks had more information than me.
Yeah, that was the other.
You got tapes and things that I don't know exist.
That was the other thing, because like both you and I were sort of limiting our information on that to try to. And so there were moments where it was like, the chat is like, listen to the tapes. I'm like, but the tapes aren't in evidence yet.
Right.
So I don't know about the tapes because I'm trying to do legal analysis on this, and I'm going, if I get all of this information that is inadmissible, I might have trouble separating out in my head which things are in and which things are out.
Yep.
Because, I mean, I've had trials where you walk out and, you know, there have been contentious evidentiary issues. And I'm going like, you know, I've got like a checklist of which videos went in, and I'll have to watch, for instance, watch all the videos that didn't go in just so I know what things aren't being considered. And I'm like, okay, you know, what can I do with this case?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I sort of started, like, I can remember the moments, like I started out with the Depp trial, basically going, why are all of you guys interested in this? Is it just because there's a celebrity? Because legally, this is boring. It's kind of what I thought at the outset.
I think he said that. I think he said, it's a defamation case. What are y'all doing?
Yeah, it's like, well, not just defamation, but it's defamation against a celebrity.
Yep.
Which, I mean, you can say a lot about celebrities without catching a defamation thing, because it's just like, I heard a rumor and I believed it is often good enough.
Yeah.
Depending on the nature of the rumor. But, and again, talk to a lawyer if you're considering something that might be defamatory, especially against somebody who might be able to fund a lawsuit against you. But,
sure.
You know, it's like, I was like, this is not going anywhere. And then I was basically popping on channels because I just like hanging out with people. That's the other thing about these things, is you're just hanging out with friends, right?
You get to have conversations.
And I was like, holy crap, there's actually potentially a case here.
Yeah. I was surprised by that too.
I was just like, wow, this is really a case. Okay, so yeah. And then of course I end up actually in Virginia.
You fly down. I love it. Tim here says my biggest issue.
We've got Nurse Liz in the chat, and she was one of the heroes of the whole Virginia
setting up line stuff. All right, I'll try to grab that. Tim Ring says, my biggest issue with Legal Eagle's content is that it always comes across to me as very surface level, too quick hit for me with not enough depth. I like long form content too much, I suppose. Yeah, what I like about Legal Eagle is that he brings these complicated notions to the people with that glossiness. Right. One thing you can never expect from me is the level of glossiness that Legal Eagle brings to the table. There's an actual cable news program type approach to editing and things that he does over there. And my hope is that helps as kind of a gateway, right? Like he reaches however many millions of people that he does. And if you want to know more, you've got longer form content, because he's never, as far as I know, he's never going to do that.
That's the thing, is sometimes he's got like, here's a 6-minute video. And, you know, I'm like, this is a complicated legal issue. And you did pretty good in 6 minutes, but like,
sometimes he summarizes too much. Look, I'm never going to say any of us are perfect on any of this stuff. We're human beings just like anybody else. And I do get the understanding of legal. Sometimes, you know, hits the summation a little hard for what he's actually presented. But
brings so many, he brings so many people into like, let's analyze this like a lawyer. And, you know, I don't always agree with his takes either. But I do think that he makes takes that are at least like, that he's at least trying to reason through things. And I mean, I appreciate that sometimes he's going and doing takes that are like, I don't like this outcome, but it appears to be what the law says. And
no, and he's a little politicized. I mean, like, people have asked me to do more of those stuff and like responses to things like this. No, we're not going to do politics much here. But
I get people asking me to do like a response video to Legal Eagle stuff, and I'm like, I don't want to like throw rocks at Legal Eagle. No. So even if I think he's wrong, I'll just do my own video and not like throw rocks at him specifically.
Well, like I said, I want to give him full credit for the name of my video was Legal Eagle's Wrong on COPPA. He reaches out and says, I think you're right. Do you want to do some videos on my channel? Cool.
That that gets tremendous.
Yeah.
You know, somebody who can say, hey, I was wrong on, or I think you've got the right thing. Hey, I'm going to reach out. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, he could have smashed the channel before it started. I mean, like,
I mean,
I don't know what I was doing.
Somebody like that can like send a lot of hate your way too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Nick says 30 plus years as a union rep in labor law. The stories I can't tell. I believe it. I believe even as attorneys, I think we have all those where it's just like can't talk about that.
That's the thing about law is like you can sort of tell stories, but they have to be sufficiently vague that nobody could possibly connect it to a human. And like
exactly.
Nurse so it's Liz, like once somebody stole a car.
Yes, there was a company. It was large. You would recognize it, but it was a large company. And then, yeah. Nurse Liz, good morning. I'm assuming you had a great weekend, Hoeg. I had the best. I highly recommend my weekend for anybody else. In whatever makes you as happy as I was happy on Saturday. Go find it. My Michigan State Heart.
But this is a family-friendly channel, so limit that down.
Yeah. No, go find your bliss. Is just pleased you destroyed enemy number one. Ha 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 ha. Hey, thank you, Nurse Liz. Thank you. Deanna B. Ian's live stream. Trudeau testifying was great. Love law too. You live stream Trudeau?
Yeah, he was testifying at the Emergencies Act inquiry.
Okay.
And some of the things he said were concerning.
Questionable.
Well,
yeah.
One of the quotes was, sometimes people were using protests to demand changes from their government, and I found that very worrying. And I'm like, I actually find that response worrying because like that's what protest is for.
Yeah, it's petition your government. Absolutely.
I mean, the problem is it's a protest that's very unpopular, right? And like lots of people don't like them, and that's fair. Like you don't have to like a protest, but I just am like, I'm concerned that of the measures that we take to suppress protests, because the same measures that can be used to suppress protests you don't like can be used to suppress ones you do. So I can also say it was a really wildly unsuccessful live stream because there were so many people who were watching it who were going like, hey, love your content, but dibs out because I can't stand listening to this guy.
Yeah.
Well, I think I live streamed for like 8 hours.
Oh my God.
And and I got no sleep. So I was like running on empty for this. So it was like absolutely painful. And then from that, I had to transition into something else with like no sleep. So I really messed up my whole sleep schedule in my day. And like, he was so depressing that nobody was wanting to like super chat or anything like that. So it was like 8 hours and like $40. I'm just
I'm glad you got a kudos here. Sorry, it went to me. I'll Venmo that to you, Ian.
No, it's all good. It was just,
I know those days. I know those days. That is a lot.
And I just found it depressing too at the end of it. Like, you're just sitting there watching this thing, and I'm just like, I hate that this is our country right now.
That is another aspect of this job. You do dive into a lot of stuff that you might not otherwise, or you'd let glance off you, and you talk about a lot of serious stuff. It's one of the reasons Hangouts and Headlines has kind of become the non-video game portion of my channel, but also I have a lot more lighter stuff than people might be expecting, because it's just sometimes you can only do so many of like, let's talk about fundamental liberties.
Yeah, I kind of feel like I need to set up something that's akin to this, like just a hangout stream every so often.
I think we should do once a month. Ian and Rick talk about what we're playing, games, have fun, relax.
That needs to happen for sure.
I think we'll alternate channels, and we'll have a great time with it. And we can do it. We can have it as a break time. Everybody can come in. You're all welcome.
Just like I talk criminal law stuff, and so much of it is depressing. So a video game stream would be fantastic.
Well, that was what was so fun about your charity stream. We just sat back. I think I asked you 100 questions about Hades and your enjoyment of it. And it's like, yeah, this is good. This is good stuff.
I enjoyed the heck out of that stream, and I mean, we did good stuff for the children on that.
Oh, is it
Have you seen this?
No, what is this? Is this from the Stollery?
This is from the Stollery.
Look at that.
So they met up to basically say thank you. They gave me this and a case for a commemorative coin that's on its way.
Ooh.
And here's the fun part about the commemorative coin. The commemorative coin says it says 10K on it. And they're like, because we never actually thought that we would need a bigger coin than this. So I was like, that's cool.
Yeah, that is cool. Well, great for you, Ian. I don't get this reference from Nicholas. Do you recognize this, Ian? No, you can't fire him for shooting himself in the leg with a nail gun?
I don't, but that sounds like a union. Like, that sounds like one of his.
Oh, I see, part of the stories. Okay.
And yeah, it would not surprise me. There is a criminal case about 2 workers on a site who got annoyed, and one of them just took a nail gun and drilled the other guy in the head.
That's attempted murder.
Except the nail was about an inch long, so it didn't actually do a whole lot of damage to the guy. It just kind of annoyed him.
Okay.
But the question, and they were just like all sorts of questions about how this gets handled legally. And I guess the short answer for the chat is don't nail gun yourself or other people. So
good. Hey, we don't give legal advice here, but if you're using a nail gun, be careful.
I think that's more of life advice than legal advice. Yeah.
All right. So the chat is very enthusiastic about our nerd stream. We've had it on the back burner while we went through Lawyers and Dragons. We're going to get that set up in 2023, definitely. Because Ian and I both need it. And we enjoy hanging out with each other and talking about nerd stuff. Now, I can't guarantee you that the viewership of that won't be 6 people, by the end of the next, by the time we're done. But we'll have fun.
I just started like a Role of Law channel, which is like me doing role-playing game stuff. And I mean, the viewership on that is not 6 people, but it's also not, it's not my usual channel. So I've had a moment of panic where I logged in and I was on the wrong channel, and I looked at my numbers and I went, what the? And then I realized, oh wait, I'm on Role of Law. This is my expected numbers on Role of Law. So, yeah, it's kind of an interesting sort of jump there, but actually I should have a video on that coming out on that one later today.
Excellent. All right. Well, I threatened us with leaving about a half hour ago, but I'm glad we got to do a little behind the scenes of YouTubing and hanging out and having fun with Ian, and we got to see the Stollery Bear. Folks, thank you so much for joining us for this Hangouts and Headlines. Like I said, I'm taping videos basically all day. So hopefully we'll get a virtual legality out there. I think we are going to keep premieres. I don't know how you all feel about that or not, but it's been a pretty successful experiment in November. So I think chances are we'll be airing virtual legality premieres at either 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. on any given day. And we're going to proceed with that for another month and see how that goes. YouTube seems to be liking it more. And so
I don't even know what premieres are.
So premiere is you take a video on demand and you essentially say, for the very first time that it's made available, you pick a time. So it'll be 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. on any given weekday that I air a virtual legality here. And that for that very first time, you have an open chat like it's a live stream, and people have been talking to me about questions or comments. And YouTube just seems to like it more in terms of the robots behind the scenes for this channel now that we do a kind of daily live stream. And so we're probably going to be keeping that.
That's kind of cool. I may have to try one of those. So.
And Sardonisms is just bummed that they overlap with work time. Well, look, you are not losing anything because they just would be non-premiere in any other circumstance. And so it would just be a virtual legality video on demand. So it's just an add-on. I'm very sorry you missed some Sardonisms, of course. But like I said, it's primarily because the robots seem to be treating them more nicely than the non-premieres. And we have to meet YouTube where they live. Nurse Liz just demonstrating the Midwest goodbye in real time. Hoeg, no apologies needed. Is the future we have. Just a half hour. I'll hit end broadcast anytime now. But I did want to tell folks that I'll probably put it in both the firm update for members, which I have to write, and the probably a public post that just says, here's the plan. And we're probably going to change the banner on the channel to talk about Hangouts and Headlines at its start time, which is going to remain at 7:30 a.m. For folks that were worried I was going to move it when I was asking for the poll, it looks like it's going to stay. And then mentioning specifically that Virtual Legalities will appear on weekdays. And I haven't quite decided whether I'll have rotations between 2 and 3 or just set it at 3 p.m. Eastern, so that you can know if you are sitting around and it's that time, you can check out and see if whether I'm doing a live thing and chat with me about whatever. So we're going to be moving to that format, I think, on the channel. And yeah, upwards and onwards. 4th anniversary was yesterday. The 5th year will be even better. More stuff, more Ian, more nerding out, more Hangouts, more headlines, more virtual legality. God knows Microsoft and Activision is not going to finish for at least fully half the year. So we'll have a lot of content on that, bare minimum. Ian, thank you so much for hanging out with us this morning. Thank you for everybody that visited. Nice to see you, Nurse Liz. Nice to see everybody else in chat. And I will catch you on either Virtual Legality, the next Hangouts and Headlines, or 2 or 3 secret shows I'm taping later today. So please keep your heads up for those. They may be even more technical or nerdy or both, and even less inviting to the general public. But we'll see. Thanks again, everybody, and I'll catch you on the next episode.